What is up, Digimon fans? Simon here. Welcome to HannaTalk, and today I'm here with a very special guest. Now, he is an actor who is best known to fans as Tai Kamiya from the Digimon series, from across various of the Digimon series, but also having reprised his role in the Digimon Tri film series as well as the brand new Digimon film. But he's also worked across a variety of other shows such as Cyborg 009, Duel Masters, Last Exile, Transformers, Wolf's Reign, Akira, and many more. Please welcome Joshua Seth.
Wow, thank you very much for that thorough intro.
Absolutely, that is no problem at all. How are you?
I'm great. I'm here in sunny Florida, just waiting out the quarantine, which is going on everywhere. Hope you're safe. What are you up to?
Yeah, it's been a little bit crazy, obviously with the quarantine that's been happening at the moment, and obviously rainy and cloudy here in Melbourne, Australia. So
I
it's
love Melbourne. I've been there a couple of times on my travels for Comic Cons.
oh, fantastic,
I didn't
awesome.
realize you were there. I love that city. Yeah, there's a lot of great outdoor activities that you can do there.
Absolutely, that is definitely true. And obviously during this time with the virus sort of putting things to a grinding halt in some way, how have you been keeping things up, especially on the acting side of things?
Yeah, well, I'm pivoting to do everything online. In fact, I have to, yeah, right after I get off of this podcast with you, I have to record a pickup line for the Digimon Kazuna movie that they're editing out in Hollywood. And actually, I was I was out there in Los Angeles recording the Digimon movie on the day that they locked Los Angeles down.
What?
It was the first. I don't know if you know this because you're out of the country, but this might be an interesting story to tell. Uh, when I was when I was recording this Digimon Kazuna movie, the schedule had me coming in to finalize it. I think maybe like the end of March, and it was starting to become apparent maybe in February that this is going to be pretty serious, and maybe flights will be stopped, maybe people will get stuck, and I don't live in Los Angeles anymore. Like I said, I live in Florida, which is 3,000 miles away, or I don't know kilometers because I'm American and I never learned. But it's a long way. It's a full day's flight, and and uh, and so I actually contacted the studio and said, hey, this is looking like it could impact travel, and maybe I should just fly in tomorrow. Can you guys clear some studio space? Luckily, they got right back to me and said, yes, 7 a.m. the next morning, I'm on a flight all the way across the country to LA. I check into the hotel, and I'm thinking, I'm hungry. I'm going to go out and get something to eat. And I go out onto the street. Now, where Digimon records, it's called Burbank. Burbank is like a subsection of Los Angeles, just like Hollywood is a subsection of Los Angeles. And I used to live in Burbank, and I know it like the back of my hand. I was really looking forward to checking out some restaurants and places that I used to hang out at with my friends when I lived there. And I go out on the street, and everything is closed. It's like that vampire movie where with no, not vampire. It was that zombie
Yeah,
movie
the Walking.
with
It's not The Walking Dead, is it?
Who's it? Will Smith.
I
I Am Legend.
I
It's
Am
like I
Legend.
Am
I Am
Legend.
Legend.
Yeah,
Yes.
where I go and nothing. There's nobody, not a single person on the street. Nothing is open. Nothing. And remember, nothing had closed in America at that point. Los Angeles, that was the first city to do this. And I go back to the hotel and say, "What's going on?" They tell me that the city's been locked down. I eat dinner out of a vending machine. The next day, go into the studio. Everybody's kind of, running around trying to figure out how to accommodate what's happening in real time. And I just locked myself in a recording booth with our director, Ryan, and we just knocked this whole thing out. The next day, I'm on a plane back to Florida, and one by one, more and more cities, including where I live now, started getting locked down, isolating at home. Everything shut down the way that it is now. So we just squeaked by and got this Digimon Kazuna recorded in time, luckily.
Wow. That is absolutely crazy. That is just nuts. And it's definitely true. And it's interesting that you mentioned about, of course, with going about into like well, obviously with just experiencing the lockdown during that time with recording the Digimon movie, and it just made me think like The Last of Us or like Apocalypse Now in some way. Like it's almost that kind of atmosphere at the moment. So it's pretty crazy.
That's a
But
great movie, by the way. Good reference to pull out. Although hopefully we won't go crazy like Captain Kurtz.
probably
Kurtz,
not.
was that his name? Yeah, the Marlon Brando character.
Probably not.
Isolation is not good, for a long period of time. For a short period of time, I'm kind of enjoying the tranquility and the time with my children and just slowing down for a bit. And I know that's not everybody's experience. I mean, on the one hand, we're all in this together, but on the other hand, we're all experiencing it in a different way depending on, our relationships and our financial security. And there are people out there that are, having to be first responders and do really hard work. And so I can't complain just sitting at home and being with my kids and recording things online is really not that bad. Although I do miss being on the road and traveling.
Absolutely, and that's definitely true. And I think it's really important to have those sort of things in your life to keep that isolation going for the most part. And that's definitely true. That's something you really need to hold on to during this very difficult period. And one day, and of course this thing is not going to last, and I can say straight up, history has taught us that we've been through a hell of a lot worse than what we're going through right now.
It's a good point. This too shall pass, right? And stay present. Eckhart Tolle once said, if you're a prisoner with life in prison to look forward to, how do you not go crazy? And his answer was, be in the present and realize at this moment you are in a room.
That's fantastic.
And that's focus. That's what I wrote a whole book on focus, actually, and that's the benefit of knowing how to focus your mental and emotional energies. I mean, it's important in performance so that you can be present on the mic or on stage, but it's also important in life so you can be present with your relationships and your communications and the experience that we are all living right now.
Absolutely, and that's fantastic advice right there. Now, going straight into talking about your acting career, how did you get started in acting?
I started really young, and like most performers, I just had a love of it early on. And to be successful in entertainment, you really have to have a passion for it. It can't just be about external stuff like money or fame. You have to love it, even if you're just doing it for yourself and your friends and family, and for no money. It really takes that, because for most of us, for me anyway, it took years before it was a profitable endeavor. And I just stuck with it because there was never anything else I wanted to do. But from an early age, I would perform like in school plays and things. And then when I was 8 years old, my little brother was asked to audition for a musical theater production. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest called Kent, Ohio. And nearby we had what turned out to be the biggest musical dinner theater in the country. Touring Broadway casts would come through on their tour of the Midwest, and they'd have the cast from Broadway, but they wouldn't have the kids with them, and they'd cast the kids locally. So they were doing a show called Brigadoon, and they needed a redheaded kid. My little brother's redheaded. He had no interest in doing it, but I was tagging along. My mom, brought us since I was 8, and he would have been like 4. And she said my eyes lit up, and I didn't want to leave, and I went up, like imagine like a little kid, I went up to the director and producer and said, what do I need to do to be in this production? I'll dye my hair red, you can put freckles on me with makeup. And so they didn't cast me, but they remembered me, and then they started casting me in other productions after that, and I did 8 shows a week of professional equity musical dinner theater, 8 shows a week from the time I was 8 to 18. That's what gave me my training. And you'll find that most successful voice actors have a background in vocal training, because our voice is the instrument that we're using. I mean, we all have a voice, but most of us aren't trained in how to use it. And musical theater or singing is a really good way to do that, and that's how I got started.
Fantastic, and that's definitely true. How you mentioned about, of course, with like a lot of voice actors having that background in vocal training or musical kind of backgrounds, because I've seen that across with various voice actors, where a lot of them not just being voice actors, but they also have a lot of musical careers as well. Like Brina Palencia from One Piece comes to mind. Stephanie Young, I think, is another good example of that. Lex Lang and Sandy Fox have musical
Oh, they're
backgrounds.
great. Yeah.
So it's definitely, I've definitely noticed that across with a lot of voice actors, that a lot of them have those backgrounds in vocal training and also in musical backgrounds as well, which really seems to, which they've really used to their advantage in this career, in this sort of industry, which is fantastic.
It gives you a sense of pace and musicality and drama. And also, you just know how to use your instrument. You know how to evoke different emotions. That's what I've been working on lately. We'll get into this later, but I've actually been putting together a training to teach people online how to use their voices. I mean, some people might want to use it to become a voice actor, but I imagine most people will want to use it just in their careers because it's a leadership skill, it's a sales skill, it's a communication skill. This is how we communicate our personalities, especially
Absolutely.
now that everything is online and we can't be in person to connect with people. So we're communicating online. That comes down to your voice, and it's a skill set that can be that can be
Abs
taught and can be learned.
Absolutely. And that is fantastic right there. Now, who would you consider to be your biggest influences?
Hmm. Well, early on, actually, it would be my dad because he was a radio psychologist, like that old TV show Frasier. Do you remember that show?
Yes, yes.
My dad was like Frasier in real life. He was a radio psychologist. I mean, he was a real psychologist too, but he built his practice and got his clients from being on the radio. It was a call-in show. It was very popular where I grew up. People would call in and talk about their problems, and he would help them with them on the radio, and then more people would come in and consult with him in person. So sometimes I'd come and hang out with him at the radio studio. If not for that, I don't think I would have become a voice actor, actually. It's because of that I was familiar with recording studios, and it felt like home to me. And then when I went to college, I went to a performing arts college, New York University in Manhattan, Tisch School of the Arts. And they had a radio station on the eighth floor on Broadway. And it felt like home to me to be in that radio station. I was from a small town, and then I went into this big city of New York and didn't know anybody, and everything was unfamiliar. But the microphones and the mixing boards and the radio station, that felt familiar because that's what my dad did. And that's where I began my journey into voiceover. So I would have to say he was a real big influence on me in
Wow.
that regard.
That is fantastic right there. And that's amazing how you said about like your father was like the biggest inspiration for you to go into like voice acting. But had voice acting not have happened for you because you spoke about like acting on Broadway and theater productions and all that kind of stuff, all thanks to like your brother. Would you have gone down into that sort of realm had voice acting have not have worked out?
Into live performance,
Yes.
well, actually, when I left Hollywood about 10 years ago, it was to go on the road and do my live show. So I put it on hold for voiceover. So when I was younger, I loved magic like a lot of kids. But I never stopped, is the difference. I never stopped learning it and performing it. And when I was in Hollywood, I was a member of a place called the Magic Castle in the Hollywood Hills, and I actually won an award there right around when Digimon came out in the early 2000s, and I started getting opportunities to perform. My style of magic is called mentalism. It's like magic of the mind. I did hypnosis and mind reading, and it's just a great fun show I've done thousands of times in 40 different countries all over the world, corporate events and theaters and cruise ships and casinos and colleges and everything, and even at some Comic Cons, because why not? If I'm there, I'll do the show, right? And not just do a Q&A and an autograph signing. Anyway, that's what I would have done if I hadn't gone into voiceovers, is the live shows in the theater, and that's actually what I ended up doing when I left Hollywood, because I started going bonkers just being in a recording studio all day. I wanted to be out there in the world with people.
Fantastic. And that's absolutely wonderful that you still went into that side of your life that you first got started in, like post all the voice acting stuff that you do, and you still currently continue to do even to this day as well. It's fantastic. N
Well, until the until the lockdown, until
until
COVID-19.
until this is
But yeah,
over.
it'll happen again. In the meantime, we're just pivoting to doing it online. Luckily, the recent iteration of the live show was actually keynote speeches, teaching people, showing people how to present. You know, how to move, how to speak, how to convey emotions and connect with people and communicate at your best. I was already doing that speech more recently at conferences and things in addition to the live show. So that part is an easy transference to coaching people or doing an online program, like I said, what I'm working on now. But I certainly look forward to things opening up again, going back on the road, getting back on stages and in front of live audiences. Like, it's energizing. I know for most people that's a scary proposition. Supposedly, it is the number one fear of people, that public speaking, which is all kind of performance. But for me, it's life giving. I feed off the energy from the audience, and it's hard to get that in a recording studio or at home.
Absolutely, and that's definitely true. And as you said before, once this whole pandemic is finally over, you'll finally get back into that sense of just being in front of a live audience and in a crowd and everything. So it'll definitely happen. It'll happen for all of us that are performers, that are musicians, that are actors, that have that experience performing in front of live audiences. We'll definitely be able to feel that again. So yeah. So absolutely. Now going across a bit more into your acting career, are all the roles that you've done, whether it's been live action or whether it's been in voice acting, have they been audition based?
Almost all, except for the favorite thing that I've ever done, which is Akira. So everything I ever did, I had to go in and do an audition, even if the director knew me or people in the production had worked with me. Still, the audition, usually that's because of SAG rules, union rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
To keep things fair, which is appropriate. But Akira, that's a unique experience because when I was in film school in New York City, one day I watched this animated movie that was playing in an art house theater. And remember, back then, anime wasn't a thing, at least not in America or outside of Japan. There weren't things like Digimon and Pokemon yet, or any of the original kind of shows that brought it to English-speaking audiences. So what was that movie that was playing in that art house theater? It was Akira.
Wow.
And I had this radio program, and I saw that movie, and I put two and two together and thought, I could have a career doing voiceovers and stuff like that. I would like to do this, and that's what precipitated my putting together a demo tape based on my radio show in college and getting a Hollywood agent and moving out there. And then some years later, after Digimon hit, after I had contacts and became successful in Hollywood, then Pioneer decided to re-release Akira. They put over $1 million into re-recording the music and sound effects and the new dub. And the director, the late Kevin Seymour, called and asked me to be Tetsuo. And it was just an amazing experience all around, but especially because the whole thing came full circle from when I first saw it as a college student to actually being able to star in it years later, which I never thought would happen.
That is fantastic right there. That's absolutely amazing. Now, with any sort of series or any sort of project that you worked on, do you walk into like a series or a project expecting to play like a certain role, or is it just like walking into a Jack in the Box, like you just don't know what's going to pop out?
More like a Jack in the Box. That's a funny way to put it. It not really pop out. The way that it typically works, like if you're doing it on site, you say, hey, can you go over to this agent's office to read some copy, or to this production studio, and you don't really know what it's for, and it doesn't really matter. You don't need to know what it's for. You just need to be available. So you go and you pick up the copy and you read it down while you're waiting for your opportunity to go in the booth, and then you get direction, from the director, the writer, the producer, whatever the team is on the other side of the glass, and you learn to be very flexible and adaptable in your approach. The kiss of death is to have something so locked into your mind ahead of time that you can't alter it on the fly when you're given new directions. So it's good to make choices in acting. You need to make strong choices, but on the other side of that, you need to be flexible. Flexibility is strength, and especially when you're given a direction that goes against what you originally thought when you're reading the copy. So it's kind of a benefit for it to be a jack-in-the-box experience, as you said, because it trains you to be adaptable in your approach.
That's fantastic, and that's definitely true in that fact that you need to have that flexibility in that fact, because you just never know what kind of role is going to pop right out at you, depending on the series or project that you're working on. really.
Yeah.
That's definitely
Now
true.
people are doing stuff online, and if you don't have the benefit of the director telling you what they want to change or what they really want tonally out of the piece, you're just guessing. It makes it a lot harder.
Absolutely. Now, have you now across your with whether it's been in your voice acting career or the live action stuff, have you ever turned down a role for any particular reason?
Well, I don't think I've turned down a role, but I have refused to credit myself on some stuff if I thought it wasn't very good. Now, I've been wrong too. Like, I remember, so I used to put my little brother's name on it as a sort of the vocal version of a nom de plume. So I'd say, yeah, just put this name down. It was like an inside joke for myself and my brother that I was crediting him on these projects, on the what I thought were the bad projects. But then some of them turned out to be good because you never really know when you're recording a thing how it's going to turn out. The magic is always in the editing after the actor does his part. So I remember there was one called Ark the Lad that came out really well, and I played Elk in it. And if you could ever find that, I think you'll agree it's a good piece of anime. And I was not credited as myself. There's a bunch of stuff I've done that's not even on IMDb. Although some things I'm not credited for that somehow they are listed there. I don't know who finds this stuff and updates those listings, but there's a lot of little sleuths and detectives out there that find these projects. So no, I haven't turned anything down that I can recall, but sometimes I have asked to have a fake name credited.
Ah, yes. Now, because I have seen a variety of voice actors that have listed themselves down under pseudonyms for
Mm-hmm.
specific roles and such, and that had me curious about why they would list themselves down under different names like that for various projects. And I figured it's because, like, as you said before, with they just don't want to be credited on
Yeah.
certain work that they feel like it's just not like up to the standard that they think or that it's good enough, really.
So, sometimes you just don't know what you're getting into when you accept the gig, and then you show up, and in the middle of it, you just think, oh, what, like, what am I even doing here? And you can't leave. And then you just say, well, I'm just not going to put my name on this. But I have learned in retrospect that's not always a good idea because you just never know how the thing's going to turn out after the editing process occurs. It can be very different than what you think. This happens in movies all the time.
Mm.
Uh, people think they're making some masterpiece, and then it's killed in the editing, and it's long and boring, or just confusing, doesn't make sense, or the opposite thing is true. The actors have no idea what's going on. They're not given any sort of a clue as to context. Some directors like to work that way and keep the actors in the dark for purposes of spontaneity.
Yeah.
And then they only know if it's any good after it's released. So it's just not possible to second guess it.
That's true. That is definitely true on that fact. And that actually reminds me of a very funny story with John Mulaney when he was cast in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse
Mm-hmm.
as Spider-Ham. He had absolutely no idea. He didn't know anything about the project before he got cast in while he was cast in the role. Like he spoke
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
story
He
on
played that little pig. Ham. What is it? Ham.
Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham.
Spider Ham. Oh, I love John Mulaney. He's so funny. In fact, for the listeners out there, listen to a John Mulaney skit called. It was on one of his stand-up specials called the Salt and Pepper Diner. It's the funniest thing. But that's a little aside there. But yeah, he was really good in those scenes with Spider Ham, and that's a really great movie too. But you were saying about him taking that role?
Yeah, he spoke with Jimmy Fallon, said that he knew nothing about the project, even though when people think of Spider-Man, they think they obviously know he's one of the most popular characters in Marvel history. And he said that, I got a phone call, I was just up in Los Angeles, I said hello, just a random hello, and some guy says, oh, we got this movie that we're working on, but we want you to be part of, but we can't tell you anything about it, and we can't send you a script. Because when it's these superhero movies, they tend to be very secretive about it. And he said, yeah, we can't tell you anything about it, we can't send you a script, which is how a lot of kidnappings begin. So, but I was available,
Yeah,
so
but just show up at this place with this unmarked door. That's another thing is the studios are never marked. They don't have windows because of sound, right?
yeah,
And usually the door is in the back in an alley. So yeah, it really is kind of like just walking into a kidnapping.
yeah.
But so far so good on my end. I have always made it out alive.
Well, then he started going. That's definitely true, and he started going a little bit onto like So we get to a building, and it was just up in Los Angeles. It's not a big monument or anything. It's just a big slab of concrete. And then I walk
Right.
out, and then Ronnie Rothman, the director, walks out, and he says, "Do you know what's about to happen?" Well, because if this was a kidnapping, it just started getting a little psychological right there. So,
Hmm.
and he said, "Well, what's this project I'm working on?" I said, "Oh, we got this amazing cast of characters. We got Haley Steinfeld, Mahershala Ali, Nicolas Cage, Jake Johnson, Liev Schreiber." I said, "Fantastic. Well, who else is going to be in the
Yeah.
movie?" I said,
I
"You."
went to college with Liev Schreiber. He was a genius when he was 19.
Oh, wow,
Yeah, I was in an
fantastic.
acting class with him way back then, and I was like kind of annoyed because he would always get preferential treatment in this acting class, and he was like teacher's pet, everybody's favorite, you know. And of course, oh yeah, he became who he is. He was always that person. So, so, so John Mulaney still doesn't know what's going on. He just knows he's in good company.
Yeah, so he knows that he's starring in this big movie with like this huge cast, and he says, "Oh well, oh fantastic. What's the character I'm playing?" I said, "Well, who else is in the movie?" I said, "You." "Oh wow. What's the role I'm playing?" "Oh well, you're basically playing a pig who has the powers of Spider-Man and who tells a lot of outdated 50s jokes." I said, "Bring it on."
Right, right. He's perfect.
So, so it's just absolutely fantastic how he just got into this role like not knowing what it was about, and then realizing, oh wow, so yeah, I'm about to be in a Spider-Man movie. Okay.
He's one of those performers that's really found his voice, not just in terms of the content of, the funny stuff that he says, but like you just know that it's John Mulaney as soon as he speaks. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think that's been a key to my success as well, in that I'm not trying to put on a voice. Sure, I can do the funny voices, and another shrimp on the barbie and do some sort of bad accent. So, well, no, right, mate, but I'm striving to be as pure a version of me in most of my roles as possible, and so nobody can duplicate that. No one can imitate that when you
Absolutely.
find out how to sound like what is really you.
That's absolutely true in that fact. And there's actually been a lot of voice actors that you can instantly tell straight away who that is just from listening to their voice. Like,
Mm,
obviously mentioning about your voice being the best example. Like, in a variety of the roles that I've seen you voice act in, I could tell instantly that it was you just straight up from your
mm,
voice instantly. And another best example, of course, is like with Crispin Freeman, Lex Lang,
mm, mm.
Sandy Fox, Steve Bloom, of course. Just a whole.
I'd agree with Steve Bloom though. With Lex Lang, he's an impressionist too. He can do a lot of impressions, and I'd be hard pressed to tell that it was him while he's doing those impressions. For me, I made a choice way early on that I didn't want to do impressions to sound like someone else. I wanted to sound so much like me that anybody else would have to be doing me.
Mm.
Actually, at one point, after I was like the voice of like every show on Fox Kids, at some point they stopped casting me because they felt like I was getting overexposed. And then my agent said there had been a casting call for a Joshua Seth type, and it pissed me off because I was
Wow.
like, well, wait a second, I'm right here. They could just do me, but they didn't want me, but they wanted somebody to sound like me. But really, I had achieved that objective to become sort of a vocal archetype
That's fantastic, and
for a while.
you've definitely achieved that. So that's fantastic. Now, going across into you've obviously worked across a variety of different anime projects. Now, as many fans will know, that anime is typically based on manga series. Have you ever read the manga for any anime series that you've worked on before you started working on that series?
No, it's for the same reason that I refuse to watch any other version that's ever been made of it, with the except hang on, I said no, except for Akira. I had read a little of the manga for Akira because I had already seen the original version of the movie, but I had no idea that I would be in that later on. For anything else, I refuse to. I won't even listen to what they call a scratch track, like a track that is given for pace and tone and stuff, or another version, because I don't want to be derivative. I don't want to be doing my take on something that came before. I want to come at it with fresh eyes and ears.
That's fantastic, and that actually does remind me of a little bit when I did this interview once with a few years back with Richard Epcar, where we spoke a little bit about his role
I
in
used to
the.
play poker with him at my house. A lot of these names that you're mentioning used to come to my house in LA when I lived out there, and we'd play Texas Hold'em like every Thursday night. Richard Epcar and Lex Lang and people like that. So you're choosing some interesting references in the old memory banks there.
Fantastic. That's awesome. And so we were talking a little bit about his role as the Joker in, especially primarily in the video game series, and he spoke about. I think he said that he had not listened to Mark Hamill's version of the Joker, and he didn't want to because he knew that he would end up straight up copying Mark Hamill's
Mm-hmm.
version of the voice. He wanted to do his
That's
own
what
version.
happens. Yeah, you can't help it almost because it's somewhere inside of you, and it's the easiest thing to reach for.
That's true. That is definitely true in that fact. Now, of course, with any sort of long-running like anime series that you've worked on, or any series where you're playing a character that is featured prominently across the series, do you have an idea for the story arc you're working on, like where your character is going and the overall story, or are the scenes you're working on recorded out of context?
They are typically recorded out of context, and I don't want to know the arc because I don't want to anticipate, right? It's like how you don't want to know your own death in life. It would change how you are behaving. So you don't want to know what's going to happen next to the character. However, I do want to know context for that scene. I want to know what's my relationship to the other characters and what do I as a character want for motivation. Those things are important. Sometimes I will listen to the music because the music will give you a clue as to tone and pace and so forth. But that's it. I just want to know in that moment what's the motivation and the relationship.
Fantastic. Now, going back into like the early part of your acting career is like, what was like your first voiceover role?
Hmm. I think it was. I don't remember the name, but I know it was for Saban. And the reason I know that is it was like a 1 day. Well, hang on. I'm thinking for animation. My first paid voiceover role in Hollywood was a commercial, and the commercial was for Disneyland. I was like a kid in it saying, "Mom, Dad, can we go to Disneyland? It's the Magic Kingdom, Buckaroo." It was exactly it actually, and and then I did like 50 other auditions and didn't book them, and then I booked 1 day on a cartoon. It wasn't anime; it was actual animation for Saban, which was they were doing Power Rangers at the time. And then I know that because I got two other roles out of that. I became the lead voice in a 64 episode series called Honeybee Hutch, where I played the title character, Honeybee Hutch, Honeybee Hutch, and I really learned how to voice animation from that series. And the
Wow.
wonderful Doug Stone was my director in that, who became a good friend. But the other gig that I got out of it was to be the second voice of Alpha 5 on the Power Rangers, which Saban was also doing, and that's how they were building their brand at that time. Richard Horowitz was the first voice for that, and I think he might have gone on to do Invader Zim at that point. I'm not sure why he stopped doing it, but they brought me in to do Alpha 5. And then things started to take off after that as I started to get relationships, get more confident on the mic, and people started to know who I was. It was sort of an overnight success that took many years between to training in theater and on the stage and in college, and then several years in Hollywood to get to that point, actually.
Fantastic. And that's absolutely wonderful right there. And it's funny that you mentioned about with Doug Stone because I did an interview with him like I think it was a couple just very recently actually, which many people can find on my YouTube channel, and it was just absolutely fantastic. And he spoke a fair bit about the work that he did with Saban at that time, which is it's absolutely fantastic.
Well, Doug is a genuinely funny person and a genuinely good person. I was lucky to meet him early on.
Absolutely, he is fantastic, and that's absolutely wonderful that you got to work with him in during this production of Honeybee Hutch, which is fantastic.
And
Now,
he loves cats. He really loves cats. I
he,
could care less for cats, I have to say. I'm a dog person. I used to have a little black pug, and that's never the twain shall meet. That's just my preference. But he's a cat person, but I like him anyway.
Fantastic.
No
Now,
accounting for taste.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Now, a couple of roles that come to mind for me, which were my intro to your work, was the 2003 version of Cyborg 009, where you played the title character, but also Duel Masters, where you played Shobu Kyofuda.
Mm.
What was it like playing on those series?
Well, everything was coming at me so fast after I started doing Digimon. After years of hardly having any work and basically just making my living as a magician, then suddenly the work was nonstop for several years after that until I left Hollywood. And so they all blur together in my mind. Now my memories are that my kids like watching them. My son just turned 9, and he really liked Duel Masters, for instance. And at the time, I felt like, oh, this is kind of just derivative of a lot of other stuff that's out there. But in watching it back, some of these episodes that he's watched recently, I realized, oh, that actually stands on its own. It is a good show as well. And there's so many others like that, some of which people just don't know. He's helping me find these projects anew, looking at them through his perception. There was another one he just watched where I played Spencer. Oh, it was called Tokyo Pig. I like almost forgot about Tokyo Pig. I don't know that any of your listeners would ever know Tokyo Pig. It's bizarre. It's a really weird, like don't smoke anything before you, or maybe you should, before you watch this series because it's really weird. But for the sensibilities of a 9-year-old, yeah, just lays right in there, right across the plate.
That's
Because he
fantastic.
can't, it's not like, hey, I can't show him Akira. That's too violent. I can't show him Wolf's Rain that you mentioned earlier. Wolf's Rain is just, a really high quality project that I was happy to be involved with. But again, I can't show that to him. Cyborg Soldier 9 that you mentioned, yeah, that's great too. And when I do Comic Cons, a lot of people want me to sign Cyborg Soldier 9 and Wolf's Rain paraphernalia, T-shirts, posters, DVDs, that sort of thing as well. It's amazing to me that over the years the audience for all these shows has only grown, which is a testament, I think, to their quality, but also to the fact that animation and anime is just taken more seriously by millions more people now than when I started.
Absolutely, and that's definitely true that you talk about that in that fact how like with some series that more fans remember more than others in that fact like there'll still be fans out there that'll remember like certain shows that you've worked on like more that they still love to this day forward and it shows as you said about before it's a testament to show how popular that series is and just how big anime has gotten over since I think it first exploded in the 90s, really. So,
Yeah, well, everybody thinks that it's the 90s. I get that all
mm,
the time. People think that Digimon is a 90s nostalgia thing. No, actually, Digimon came out in 2000. It
mm,
just feels like a 90s thing because there wasn't really the internet back then and we were ahead of our time talking about the digital world, the virtual world, and what became the internet. But hardly anybody had a website back then. People still had AOL emails, if at all, and it was a new thing.
absolutely.
It feels like 90s because it predates the virtual world that we all live in now.
That's
It kind
true.
of predicted it.
That's true. That's definitely true. Now, going back onto with Cyborg 009 and Duel Masters, would you be interested in coming back to play on those shows if the opportunity ever arose?
Yeah, sure, especially now that things can be recorded remotely. But honestly, it's always fun for me to just jump on a plane, go out, see some friends, and record a show. It doesn't really take that long to record a movie. Anyway, a movie you can do within a week. Show might be a little bit more difficult, but yeah, my passion for being on the mic and recording this stuff has reignited more recently, partly because of my kids, but also because of my involvement with Digimon Try.
Mm,
Before Digimon Try, I had taken like a 10-year break, and maybe not quite that long, but for years. And then now, as a result of doing these movies and doing these interviews, like even right now, I'm on this really nice, fancy condenser mic. I have kind of like a microphone fetish. Like I like the look and the feel and the weight and the substance of it. I have a real mixing board here on my desk. It's way overkill. I don't need it, but I like it. I like having this kind of little mini recording studio in my home. And so, yeah, I would love to get involved again. I just don't want to move out to Los Angeles again. Kind of like living at the beach in Florida and hiding out here.
Fantastic. Now, speaking about, of course, with the other series you worked on, you also played in, as mentioned about before, The Last Exile and Wolf's Rain. What was it like playing on those series?
Wolf's Rain was very emotive. I remember really feeling. In a way, Akira was like that for certain scenes, but with Wolf's Rain, that has a real dramatic feel. I mean, the way that the story arc of Wolf's Rain is almost like a Shakespearean drama. I don't want to give anything away, but the way that it ends would be like that style of storytelling. So yeah, it was very emotive, and I was kind of exhausted every day after recording Wolf's Rain, and I was directed by Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who's another wonderful director on that series. But that's why I remember about that was it just drained all the emotion out of me, in a good way because it was for a purpose, but it was intense. And what was the other one that you were asking about?
Last Exile.
Yes.
I think it was Last Exile. Yes.
Yeah, in Last Exile.
Yeah.
So I won some sort of fan award for that at the time. I recall for like best anime villain, and I like to think it's because I sort of went against type when I voiced it. I didn't want to voice him like a typical villain, that's yelling and pounding the table and angry. I thought, well, if he's really that powerful, he doesn't need to raise his voice. He barely needs to speak above a whisper in order to have someone do his bidding. And so I used a rather light touch with it like that, and that was a lot of fun to do.
Fantastic.
It's more fun to play villains.
That's definitely true in that fact. I think I'm trying to think of one actor that has spoke about playing villains quite a fair bit. Ian McShane, I think when he was recording on Kung Fu Panda as Tai Lung, he actually said in this one behind the scenes part of the film, saying the bad guys always get the best lines.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely true.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's definitely true. Now, you've also played across a variety of other films and shows, such as Transformers Robots in Disguise. You obviously mentioned about Akira, and you've also played in Cardcaptor Sakura the Sealed Card movie as well. What was it like working on those projects?
Yeah, it's funny when I did. I'm just going to talk about Transformer because I already discussed Akira, and I can't recall Cardcaptor Sakura very much. But for Transformers, that was before the Transformers movies came out, and I wasn't aware that what I was doing was part of this big legacy franchise. And it was only later when the movies came out and people started saying, hey, weren't you in the animated series of that I realized the scope of this thing. So it was kind of funny. At the time, it was just like another gig, and I didn't think anything about it. It was only afterwards that I realized.
Wow, that's fantastic right there.
I just wasn't familiar with it. It seems weird now, but I didn't know Transformers when I did it.
That's fantastic. And obviously because, as you mentioned about before, because we have the live action movies now, and having had that experience working in the Transformers series, having now of course just having the live action movies like the ones done with Michael Bay, and of course to the Bumblebee movie, that was essentially a reboot of the live action films. Have you ever watched any of the Transformers movies?
Yeah, I liked the first one. I really did like the first one. I always liked the first of these movies. Like, I liked the first Iron Man as well, and then all the Avenger movies that came after it, I liked less and less because more people got involved, and I felt like the storyline got muddied, and it's just too much to follow. But with that original one, where you're seeing Tony Stark transform and go through this process in the cave and having to save his life and all that, I like that. I like stories. I like that kind of a story, and it's the same thing with Transformers. The kid suddenly being thrust into this world with these cars that become robots, and having that transformation occur for the first time, that appeals to me. Although running around and blowing things up later on, less so.
Fantastic. And speaking of it, of course,
I sound all that running around and blowing things up. Yeah, you can't bear it. Phooey.
Fantastic. Now, speaking of course with Marvel actually, as and actually going into talking about Akira, there were reports that were going about for quite a long time about them doing a live action film on Akira with Taika Waititi, who of course many people know did Thor Ragnarok, and of course is going to be directing the next Thor movie. What has been your opinion on that? Like having Taika Waititi do a live action Akira?
My opinion is I don't believe it because so many times over the years, people have said, "Oh, did you hear they're going to do a live-action version of Akira?" I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio was supposed to be involved at one point. These things come and go, and none of them have ever happened. However, if this one actually does happen, and you're listening, yeah, give me a ring. Wouldn't the fans love it if the voice of Tetsuo did some on-camera cameo? Be sort of like a little bonus Easter egg in there. So
Absolutely,
I'd be down for that.
that would be fantastic if they did that. And
It
actually,
does happen.
it's actually quite interesting because I read across this interview that Taika Waititi did about the film on the reports going about, and he said that if he got the opportunity to do the film himself, he would keep it very accurate to the books. So he's like a huge nerd basically. So he
Longer
said,
form probably then.
yeah, so he would keep it very accurate to the books, and he would not do any white casting for this one. He would cast very accurately for this movie.
It's as you talk about Akira again. I'm looking across my office here, and I have a framed original art poster of Akira that was done special for the Edinburgh Comic Con last year, which I was lucky enough to be brought out for. And that was just a great experience, headlining that Comic Con and talking about the movie, because the whole Comic Con was themed around Akira. Presumably, Akira takes place, in this time. And Edinburgh was just wonderful. And I came home with this great piece of artwork that was commissioned for that con, and I have it staring me in the face right now, life sized.
That would probably say straight up, like if fingers crossed that a live action Akira film will happen, and pray that Taika gets the chance to direct it.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely. Now, talking about your most famous series to date is, of course, the Digimon series, playing Tai, which you've played, but you've also played across various other Digimon series, from the original into the recent series as well. What was it like stepping into the world of Digimon for the first time?
For the first time, it was very pure, and I was really just doing an aspect of my own personality. The courageous aspect, the reluctant hero stuff came later on. Originally, Tai was all gung-ho. Come on, let's do it. Let's save the world. And it was all very exciting and new, to be starring in a show that it was the number one animated show on Saturday morning television the year it came out here. So there was all that, but that experience, of course, changed as Digimon itself changed through the years, and they grew up in the course of Tai and now Kazuna, in the course of Tri rather, and now Kazuna.
Absolutely, that's definitely true in that fact. Now, speaking about, of course, with Tri, you also came back into playing Tai again during the Tri series, and as you mentioned about before, how you took like a bit of quite a bit of a break from voice acting. Like, what was it that inspired you to come back into that world?
It was the fans. I wouldn't have even known that Digimon Tri was going into production, except fans started posting on Facebook, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter probably too much. I'm also on Instagram if anybody wants to follow me. But they started private messaging me and saying, "Do I know anything about this?" And I'm saying, "No. What can you tell me? I'm kind of out of that world." And then I sort of asking around. I can't say who I asked, but somebody told me that they had actually started recording and cast somebody else as Tai, which pissed me off. And I reached out to the studio and I'm like, "Hey man, like, nobody asked me. I think the fans would like to hear me and I'd be down to come back." And the head of the studio actually reached out, called me, apologized, said, "We knew you retired from voice acting and you're big touring act now, but look, this is a legacy. I don't want anybody else voicing Tai, and like, for the fans and for my kids, I want to keep that character alive. And damn it, I'm Tai." So luckily they hired me and they scrapped everything that they already recorded, and we started over. And what you have now are all 6 Digimon Tri movies. And by the way, why do they call it Tri when there are 6 movies? Should be Digimon Septet. Dick Nibbit.
Yeah.
Dick. Tri means 3.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
I just did a cameo. I'm on Cameo now, like for those video shout-outs, and somebody wanted me to do like a cameo video for his family. So they were all, isolating in place, and he's doing a film festival of Digimon Tri. And so I have the DVDs here, and I'm showing them on the video, and explaining to them, yeah, I know there's more than 3 movies here. It doesn't make sense to me either.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's just fantastic. Well, that's really up to the person that created the Tri series. They were just thinking, yeah, I know there's 6 films, but let's call it Tri.
Maybe they didn't realize it would go 6 films.
Maybe. That's fantastic. That's wonderful. Now, Digimon, as many people will know, has spawned several series over the years that has actually gotten quite dark compared to how the original series was done. What's been your view on that, on such a really big tonal shift from the original series to like where it is now?
I really like it. I think they've done a good job. At first, it was a little jarring when I came back for Digimon Tri, and the first thing I noticed was that the music was different. I had just assumed, without thinking about it, I assumed they'd go with Digimon, Digital Monsters, Digimon are the champions, because it's so iconic. And then I came in and I wanted to hear the music. Like I said, I don't listen to any lines, but I would like to hear the music. And it was much sort of harsher and more grown up, as the characters are. But now that we've done it, I realize it was a good decision, because the characters have grown and the audience has grown. And so that's one of the reasons I think Digimon is better than Pokemon, because it evolves, right? The characters aren't the same all the time. I mean, as people, we don't want to be the same people now that we were 10 years ago. So why should the characters be the same? Let them have some sort of evolution and arc and growth as well. I just think it's more interesting.
I definitely think it's more interesting that way, and that's fantastic that you mentioned about, of course, with like obviously seeing the development of these characters grow up over the course of from where the original series started to like where it is now. It's definitely true on that, and that's just fantastic. Now, speaking about, of course, a little bit more with Digimon, like you obviously spoke a little bit about the Digimon Kazuna, which is considered to be the finale to the original like series that we've had since Digimon Adventure. But we also have the brand new reboot series on Digimon Adventure. What is it that you hope to see answered in this this latest film, and what has been your opinion about them rebooting the franchise?
Well, the reboot I know is put on hold because of coronavirus and the studios being shut down, so I don't have any more information on the reboot beyond that. But in terms of Kazuna, I don't need to guess or think, because I've seen the film now, and I can tell you it's really good. But I have these non-disclosure agreements, so I can't really say anything beyond the fact that I think it's really good, and I wouldn't tell you otherwise. Believe me, I would say skip it if it weren't. But I think that the fans are going to be really happy with the way this all turned out.
That's absolutely fantastic right there. Now, speaking about, of course, with a lot of different revivals and reboots that we've had over the years, like we've had, obviously we've got the the Digimon reboot series, which will get back into development once this pandemic is over. But we've also had Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which was a reboot from the first original series. But we also had Fruits Basket over the last couple of years, with Laura Bailey, Jerry Jewell, Eric Vale, like all the original actors coming back into that series. If there was ever the chance for you to, would you ever consider the opportunity to come back into that? Like as mentioned about before, like Tai is the one character that you want to continue playing for many years to come. What is it that you hope to see answered when this reboot happens?
I just don't know what direction they're going to go. Like, what I've heard is it's going to be sort of a parallel universe or a parallel storyline. I mean, you probably know more than me about it, and I haven't thought much about it, and I don't know that I would have any idea what direction they're going in.
That's
Honestly,
true.
I'm just not sure that it's the same storyline as the original. That's all I've heard so far. Is it's like a parallel universe or something, right?
I believe so, yeah. As far as I know, they haven't given
But
off any.
I'm guessing. I don't know any more than anybody else. I probably know less.
Right. As far as I know, I don't think they've said too much information about the reboot, other than the fact that they've been focusing a lot on Digimon Kazuna and the fact that they made the announcement about the reboot series. But I think, but suffice to say, I think based on any sort of anime that's been redone over the last, like quite recently, actually, obviously speaking about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and of course Fruits Basket, I think it's safe to assume that I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So that's my view about it, really.
Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Now, speaking about, of course, with revivals or reboots, if you wanted to do another revival or reboot of one show you've worked on, what would you want that to be?
Yes, that is easy. That that is the first thing that I did that we talked about at the beginning of the interview, Honeybee Hutch. Simply because it was a really sweet show, as I recall, and nobody has seen it. And what better candidate for a reboot than something that was really sweet and a good product to begin with, but that nobody has seen, and that would be Honeybee Hutch. I just don't
Fantastic.
know what ever happened to that show. Sometimes, like, there's an issue with rights when rights get sold or the project gets shelved as a result of ownership disputes, and I always kind of wondered if that was what the situation was. Occasionally, I've even looked for my work in that show on YouTube and online, and I've never been able to find it.
Wow. That's insane. Well, fingers crossed they end up doing a revival of that series because it that would be fantastic if that would happen. So, absolutely. Now another follow-up question to that is if you wanted to do a spin-off series of any show you've worked on, what show would you want that to be, and what would you want the spin-off to focus on?
Yeah, back to Akira. I think it would be really interesting to have a backstory in Akira of Tetsuo, of that relationship before the movie starts. Before the bad, crazy stuff goes down, because there's obviously like a whole backstory there between Tetsuo and why am I blanking? Who are the other people in that? There was an original scene with Tetsuo and Kaneda, and there was a girl in that. And they went to a school. It's been like a year since I've seen this movie, so I'm blanking on it. But I remember that would have been like an interesting concept to pursue. Of like, they were hanging out in a bar at the very beginning as kids, and they were sort of like in a gang and ne'er do wells. I thought there'd be a lot of stories to tell as a
Fantastic.
backstory, I think, for Akira.
Fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic right there. And where do you hope to see yourself with regards to acting in the long run?
No one knows obviously what the future holds, and I always just stay present and plan for what the next step is going to be. And
Fantastic.
as I began to mention earlier, the next step, what I'm working on now, is pivoting to online and transferring my skill set to other people. Because I wish I had somebody like me as a mentor or a coach early on, because I had this passion, but I didn't know, and I felt like I had some talent, but I didn't know what to do with it. And it really takes somebody that's been there and walked the walk to show you the way if you don't want to waste years. And it did. It took me years to get successful in Hollywood. So that's why I'm putting together an online course to show people how to do this themselves. And I'm starting to do some online coaching, since we're all at home anyway.
Fantastic. And what two shows have you worked on would you want to see a crossover between, like story-wise and character-wise?
Oh my gosh. A crossover. Uh, Giant Robo. Because that was an interesting one too that we haven't talked about. Giant Robo and Racing Stripes. How's that? Those two great tastes that don't go together at all. That would be very interesting. Robots and zebras.
That would be
See what
interesting.
happens.
That
Yeah.
would be interesting. That would be a very interesting
Yeah.
crossover right there. That would be fantastic nonetheless. So, and what is like one character or series that you've ever wanted to play or ever wished that you played?
Oh, honestly, I do wish that I had been in uh, what's that monkey? That Curious George. So after I left Hollywood and went on the road, they started Curious George, and I always loved those books as a kid. I love reading them to my kids, and we watched that show. And Laura Jo Miller, who played my younger sister Kari in Digimon, was actually one of the kids in Curious George. And it's the only time I kind of ever felt jealous and felt like, if I were still in Hollywood, I'll bet I could have been in Curious George, and that just would have been such an. We've got a Curious George little toy here, little stuffed animal, and like that would have been really something because that is something that I knew from childhood myself, and I thought they did a great job with that show.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful right there.
Maybe not as George, but one of the characters in it.
Well, you never know. It could happen one day. And what is your view on where the voice acting and animation industry stands within the entertainment industry?
Well, it's evolved a lot. As we mentioned earlier, the audience has only grown. Pixar showed everyone that animation can be just as good and profound and impactful as live action. And now there's even a category in the Oscars for it. It used to just be that the voice actors would get Annies, but now animation itself gets an Oscar. And I would like to see more opportunities for voice actors who aren't already on camera celebrities. The future has already been written in that celebrities get their pick of the most high profile roles. And I understand why, because they carry with them a following that can turn into tickets that get sold. But if I had my druthers, if I were king and I got to make my own rules in Hollywood, it would be that those opportunities would be available to voice actors regardless of on-camera fame, and just give it to the person that does the best job on the mic.
That's definitely fantastic, and I definitely agree on that. In that fact, it's actually funny because I did an interview a while back with Tiffany Grant, where we spoke about her latest projects, but also she spoke about how in the fact that like animation, like especially these big Hollywood studios like Pixar, Studio Ghibli, all these sort of things, have cast like huge name actors that are already successful live action actors, but not necessarily casting like people already in the voice acting industry for that matter because they
Right,
want.
that's what I'm referring to. And if I could change one thing about the entertainment industry in regard to voice acting, it's that at least the opportunity would be available to voice actors, because those of us who have a love of voice acting, we have a wealth of experience that runs throughout our careers. And typically, when you see a voice actor in a big budgeted movie, if they weren't already in a show upon which it's based, for instance, then they're just in a loop group doing background
Mm,
voices, and oftentimes they would do just as well as the stars in the leading roles as well.
absolutely, and that's definitely fantastic about that. And I actually, and speaking of myself as a fan who's been going to comic conventions for nearly 6 years now. Yeah, 6 years now. I've been going since 2014, for that
Right.
matter. And I said to many guest stars, actually, I've said to a lot of the people that attend those conventions that said, like, people are asking me, why do you go to conventions? I said, I go to meet the voice actors. I go,
Mm-hmm.
those people, they're my rock stars right there. So that's
Oh,
what I say.
thank you for your support.
Thank you. That's no problem at all. Now,
I've done the Armageddon Pop Culture Expo 2 or 3 times in Sydney.
oh wow. That's fantastic. What was that like? What was like your first time going to a convention in Australia?
Yeah, well, the first time I went early, like a week early, and I went on a liveaboard dive boat off of Lizard Island in the to see the Great Barrier Reef and dive out there, and I just had a wonderful time.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. Now, without getting into any spoilers, what's next for Joshua Seth for the fans to know about?
Yeah, well, I would hope that after this, first of all, that my fans would check me out on social media, because I stay very engaged every day, posting something. I've been actually on my YouTube channel, I've been doing these YouTube lives, and I'm doing one tomorrow, actually. So the YouTube lives are an opportunity for the fans to ask me questions. I'm going to give insider information like stories about the recording of Digimon Kazuna, and maybe I'll be bringing on some special guests in the future from the voice acting community friends that I've had for a long time. But I've been having a great time on these YouTube lives and interacting with the fans that way, but also just on Facebook and Twitter as well. Oh, and if you go to joshuaseth.com/free, I'm going to have a special gift for your listeners about some vocal training that they can do. Just a little giveaway that'll go more in depth on the concepts that I brought up earlier about what I'm developing currently to help people to sort of open up the notes of their own vocal instrument, whether they want to be a voice actor or not, but just to start to learn how you can use your voice to communicate more effectively.
That's fantastic. And I'll be sure to put a link for that in the description once this interview is finally up. That's fantastic. And final question, what do you think Ty would say if he was in Australia?
Good day, mates. How's things in the digital world down under? Crikey.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. Joshua Seth, thank you so much indeed. It's been an absolute honor.
Thank you for having me.
That's no problem at all. And is there anything else you would like to say to the fans out there in Australia and in the world?
Hey, just thank you for your support. I don't think that we would still be making Digimon movies if it weren't for having such an active and engaged fan base. So the fact that I came back, the fact that Digimon Tri and Kazuna even exists, I think it's all because of you. It's all because of the fans. So thank you for letting me have the opportunity to do what I love and for supporting these shows over the years.
That's absolutely wonderful right there. That is fantastic. Well, guys, if you'd like to find out more about Joshua Seth, you can catch him on his live stream tomorrow, which I'll be sure to put a link for in the description, as well as all the other links to all of his other work. And don't forget, subscribe to HannaTalk, follow me on both Facebook and Twitter, and if you guys have any suggestions at all, just comment below. Thank you all so much for listening. This is Simon and Joshua Seth signing off. Bye for now.